Hands up! Stop reaching!
I am deaf. I cannot hear you.
Hands where I can see them! Hands up or I will tase you!
Show me your hands. Hands up. Stop reaching. Hands where I can see them. Hands up or I will tase you. Anthony Lewis could not hear a single word. Before we go any further, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and country in the comments. And if stories like this matter to you, if justice and truth matter to you, please subscribe and support the channel. Now let me tell you what happened next. It was 2:47 p.m. on a bright Wednesday afternoon in October. The sun was high. The sky was clear. Traffic was light. Anthony Lewis, 28 years old, was driving home in his gray Honda Civic after finishing an interpreting job at a medical clinic. Anthony was born profoundly deaf. From 8 months old, his parents knew he could not hear. Doctors confirmed bilateral sensorineural hearing loss. Sound never traveled properly from his ears to his brain. He grew up using American Sign Language. By 5 years old, he wore bilateral hearing aids behind both ears. They were beige, curved, clearly visible in daylight. The hearing aids helped him sense loud vibrations. They did not let him understand speech. He could not hear voices. He could not hear shouting. He could not hear sirens. That afternoon he was driving carefully. Speed limit 35. He was going 33. Seatbelt on. Hands steady. He did not know his left tail light had burned out earlier that day. Red and blue lights flashed behind him. He saw them in his mirror. He did not hear the siren, but he did not need to. Lights mean pull over. Anthony calmly signaled, slowed down, and pulled to the right shoulder. He put the car in park, turned off the engine, placed both hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, exactly the way driver safety videos recommend. A blue disabled parking placard hung from his rearview mirror. The words "hearing disability" were printed clearly on it. His hearing aids were visible on both ears. Officer Daniel Polson stepped out of his patrol car. Polson ran the license plate. Clean record. No warrants. Routine traffic stop for a broken taillight. He walked to the driver's side window and knocked on the glass. Anthony did not react. Polson frowned and knocked again, harder. Still nothing. Polson knocked a third time, loud and sharp. Anthony felt the vibration through the door panel. He turned his head and saw the officer. Anthony slowly moved one hand to press the window button. The window began to slide down. Polson immediately shouted, "Keep your hands where I can see them." Anthony could not hear him. The window lowered fully. Anthony turned toward the officer and smiled politely. Then he began signing. Clear, calm, slow movements. "I am deaf. I cannot hear you." The ASL sign for deaf is simple. Index finger touches the ear, then the mouth. Anthony made that sign clearly. Polson stiffened. He did not know sign language. All he saw were hands moving. "Keep your hands still. License and registration." Polson yelled. Anthony continued signing. "I am deaf. I have hearing aids." He pointed to his right ear, then his left ear. Both hearing aids were clearly visible in the sunlight. Polson saw the movement toward the head. His training focused on hand control. Hands moving meant possible danger. He placed his hand on his holstered weapon. "Show me your hands. Now." Anthony still could not hear. Trying to cooperate, Anthony reached slowly toward the glove compartment to retrieve his registration. Polson saw the movement toward the dashboard. In his mind, the situation escalated. He drew his service weapon and aimed it at Anthony. "Hands up. Do not reach for that." Anthony opened the glove compartment. Inside was paperwork. No weapon, no threat. He pulled out the registration card and turned back toward the officer, holding it out with a small smile. He was trying to help. Polson quickly holstered his gun and instead pulled out his taser. Yellow and black. Less lethal, but powerful. Hands up or I will tase you. Anthony could not hear the warning. The taser fired. Two metal probes shot forward, attached to thin wires. They hit Anthony in the chest and abdomen. 50,000 volts surged through his body. Every muscle locked at once. His back arched. His hands clenched. The registration paper fell from his fingers. He could not breathe. He could not move. 5 seconds of electrical current felt endless. Then his body collapsed sideways in the seat. The shock stopped, but the pain did not. Anthony gasped for air. Tears streamed down his face. His chest burned where the probes were embedded. He looked up at Officer Polson in confusion. His hands shook as he signed desperately. Deaf. I am deaf. I cannot hear you. Why? Polson did not understand the signs. He opened the car door and shouted for Anthony to get out. Anthony stayed seated, crying, still signing deaf. Polson grabbed his arm and pulled him from the vehicle. Anthony's legs were weak. He fell to his knees on the roadside. His hands went up in surrender. Polson forced his arms behind his back and snapped handcuffs on tightly. Anthony sobbed. Even with his hands restrained, he tried to sign with his fingers. Deaf. Traffic slowed as drivers stared. A second patrol car pulled up. Officer Linda Martinez stepped out. She looked at Anthony on the ground. She noticed the hearing aids immediately. She saw the disabled placard hanging from the mirror. She looked at Polson. Is he deaf? Polson paused. Martinez stepped closer to Anthony and slowly signed one word. Deaf. Anthony's face changed instantly. Relief. He nodded rapidly. Yes, deaf. Martinez looked back at Polson, her expression serious. He couldn't hear you. The silence between them was heavier than any shout. On the body camera footage, everything was clear. The hearing aids were visible. The placard was visible. The signing was clear. The reaching was slow. The registration was in his hand when the taser fired. There was no weapon, no aggression, no threat. Just a deaf man trying to comply. And in that bright October sunlight, a routine traffic stop had turned into violence. The damage had already been done. And this was only the beginning. Anthony sat on the curb shaking while Officer Linda Martinez carefully removed the taser probes from his chest and abdomen. Blood dotted his gray shirt. His breathing was fast. His hands trembled. He kept signing one word over and over. Deaf. Martinez nodded gently to reassure him. She pulled out her phone and typed a message. You are safe now. We understand you are deaf. Ambulance coming. Anthony read the screen. Tears rolled down his face. He typed back. I told him. I pointed to my ears. I was getting my registration. Martinez looked over at Officer Daniel Polson. His face was pale. He stared at the ground for a moment before finally looking at Anthony's hearing aids, clearly visible in the sunlight. I didn't see them, Polson muttered. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They checked Anthony's pulse, elevated, blood pressure high, burn marks where the probes entered his skin. They cut away part of his shirt to inspect the wounds. Small punctures, but painful. Anthony flinched each time someone touched him. Every time a paramedic spoke, he looked confused until Martinez typed the words for him. They loaded him into the ambulance. At County General Hospital, doctors examined him. No permanent heart damage. Muscles sore. Skin burned but treatable. They noted psychological distress in the medical chart. At 3:45 p.m., Anthony's mother rushed into the hospital room. She froze when she saw the bandages on his chest. Her hands flew into motion. What happened? Anthony signed the story slowly, painfully. Police lights. Pulled over. Signed deaf. Pointed to hearing aids. Reached for registration. Taste. His father arrived moments later. His jaw tightened as he watched his son sign. They hurt you for being deaf. Anthony nodded. That evening, at home, The family sat around the dining table in silence. Anthony's chest hurt every time he moved, but the deeper pain was in his mind. He kept replaying the moment. The smile on his face, the registration in his hand, the sudden electric shock. He barely slept that night. The next morning, Anthony could not stop shaking whenever he thought about driving. He checked his tail lights twice before even sitting in the car. His hands trembled as he held the steering wheel. His father contacted a civil rights attorney named Rebecca Chen. Rebecca had handled multiple police misconduct cases. She agreed to meet that afternoon. In her office, an ASL interpreter sat beside Anthony. Rebecca listened carefully as Anthony described every detail. She asked one key question. Was there body camera footage? Anthony nodded. Yes. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. That footage will tell the truth. 3 days later, the footage arrived. Rebecca watched it alone first. Bright daylight, clear video. Anthony's hearing aids were visible from the moment the window went down. The disabled parking placard was clearly hanging in front of the camera. The signing was obvious. The pointing to both ears happened twice. The registration card was in Anthony's hand when the taser fired. Rebecca watched it again. And again. She called Anthony's family that evening. We are filing a federal lawsuit. The lawsuit accused Officer Polson and the City Police Department of excessive force and violation of disability rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. It also claimed failure to train officers to recognize disabilities. The complaint listed clear facts. Anthony was born profoundly deaf. He wore visible hearing aids. He had a disability placard. He signed clearly that he was deaf. He pointed to his hearing aids. He was tased while holding his registration. No weapon was found. No threat was present. Within weeks, the story spread beyond the courtroom. Local news stations aired clips of the body camera footage. Advocacy groups for the deaf community began calling Anthony. Members of the National Association of the Deaf contacted Rebecca offering support. Anthony felt overwhelmed. He did not want fame. He wanted peace. But each time he watched the footage, anger replaced fear. He saw himself trying to communicate. He saw the officer not seeing him. Discovery began. Rebecca requested Officer Polson's training records. They showed 0 hours of disability awareness training, 0 hours of instruction on recognizing hearing aids, 0 training in basic ASL. Rebecca also uncovered 4 previous complaints against Polson involving use of force. None had resulted in discipline. Anthony's anxiety worsened during this period. He started seeing a trauma therapist who specialized in PTSD. Loud vibrations startled him. Police lights in the distance caused his chest to tighten. He began avoiding certain roads. His therapist explained that his body now associated police encounters with danger. 6 months after the incident, depositions began. Officer Polson sat across from Rebecca in a conference room. A court reporter typed every word. Rebecca placed a still image from the body camera on the table. The image showed Anthony's face, hearing aids visible. "Do you see the hearing aids in this image?" Rebecca asked. Polson nodded slowly. "Yes. Did you see them during the traffic stop?" "No. They are clearly visible, correct?" "Yes." Rebecca slid another image forward. It showed Anthony pointing to his ear. "What is he doing here?" "He's moving his hand toward his head, toward his hearing aid." Pause. "Yes. Did you receive any training on recognizing hearing aids?" "No." "Did you receive any training on communicating with deaf drivers?" "No." Rebecca leaned forward. "Would you agree that if you had recognized he was deaf, you would not have tased him?" Polson swallowed. "Yes." The room went silent except for the sound of typing. Anthony watched the deposition recording later with his parents. He saw Polson admit it. If he had known, if he had been trained, if he had looked closer, none of it would have happened. The case moved toward trial. The city attempted to settle quietly at first. They offered $1.2 million. Rebecca refused. "This is not just about money," she told Anthony. "This is about change." Anthony nodded. He wanted officers trained. He wanted policies rewritten. He wanted what happened to him never to happen again. 14 months after the traffic stop, the trial date was set. Anthony stood outside the federal courthouse on the first morning. He looked up at the building, took a deep breath, and signed to his parents. "Let's do this." Inside, 8 jurors waited to hear the truth. And this time, Anthony would be heard. The courtroom was quiet when Anthony Lewis walked in. His parents sat behind him. An American Sign Language interpreter stood beside the witness stand. The jury watched carefully. Anthony raised his right hand and took the oath. He began signing. The interpreter spoke his words out loud. "I was born deaf. I cannot hear voices. I use sign language to communicate. I wear hearing aids, but they do not let me understand speech. I depend on what I see." The jury listened closely. Anthony explained how he learned ASL as a child, how he attended Gallaudet University, how he became a certified interpreter to help deaf people communicate with doctors and courts. He explained that his life was about bridging gaps between worlds. Then he described the traffic stop. "I saw the police lights. I pulled over. I kept my hands on the wheel. I signed that I am deaf. I pointed to my hearing aids. I reached for my registration. Then I felt electricity go through my body." His hands shook as he described the pain. "It felt like my body stopped working. I could not breathe. I did not know why he was hurting me." The jury saw his emotion, even though he did not raise his voice. The interpreter's tone stayed calm, but the weight of his words filled the room. On the large courtroom screen, attorney Rebecca Chen played the body camera footage, frame by frame. She paused when the window rolled down. "You can see the hearing aids here," she said. The jurors leaned forward. The devices were clear. She played the moment Anthony pointed to his ear. Pause. "You can see him pointing directly to the hearing aid." She played the taser firing. Several jurors flinched. The defense attorney argued that Officer Daniel Polson made a split-second decision for his safety. He said the officer believed Anthony was reaching for a weapon. Rebecca stood. "Look at the video," she said simply. There was no weapon. There was no fast movement. There was no threat. Just a man holding paperwork. Then came the most intense moment of the trial. Officer Polson took the stand. He looked nervous. Rebecca approached him calmly. "Officer Polson, how long have you been a police officer?" 7 years. "In those 7 years, how many hours of disability awareness training have you received?" "None." "Did you receive training on recognizing hearing aids?" "No." "Training on communicating with deaf drivers?" "No." Rebecca clicked to a still image of Anthony pointing to his ear. "What is he doing here?" "He is moving his hand toward his head." "Is he pointing at his hearing aid?" "Yes." "Was the hearing aid visible?" "Yes." "Why did you not see it?" Polson shifted in his seat. "I was focused on his hands." Rebecca's voice remained steady. "His hands were signing that he is deaf." "I did not know that." "Did you consider that he might not be able to hear you?" "No." "Why not?" "I assumed he would respond if he heard me." Rebecca paused. "He is deaf. He could not respond because he could not hear. Do you agree?" "Yes." "Would you have tased him if you knew he was deaf?" "No." The courtroom went silent. Anthony watched the exchange with steady eyes. The jurors looked from the screen to Polson to Anthony. The defense tried to argue that Anthony should have kept his hands still. Rebecca objected. "How can a deaf person follow verbal commands he cannot hear?" The judge sustained the objection. On the 4th day, a medical expert explained Anthony's hearing loss in simple terms. He cannot hear speech. Hearing aids do not restore normal hearing. He relies on sight. An ASL expert explained that the sign for deaf is basic and widely known. It is not an aggressive gesture, the expert said. It is clear communication. A retired police chief testified that officers must consider disability before escalating force. There were multiple signs, he said. Hearing aids, placard, signing, pointing, all visible in daylight. Then came closing arguments. Rebecca stood before the jury. This case is not complicated. A deaf man was pulled over for a broken taillight. He tried to communicate. He was tased because the officer did not recognize his disability. The Constitution protects citizens from excessive force. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires reasonable accommodation. Anthony Lewis was given neither. The defense repeated the words "officer safety" many times. But the video spoke louder. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Anthony sat outside the courtroom with his parents, hands folded tightly. Finally, the courtroom doors opened. The jury filed in. The foreperson stood. On count 1, excessive force, we find the defendant liable. Anthony's heart pounded. On count 2, violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, liable. His mother gripped his hand. On count 3, failure to train, liable. His father exhaled slowly. On all remaining counts, liable. Anthony closed his eyes. Justice. But the case was not over. The next phase would determine damages. Financial experts testified about lost income and emotional harm. Mental health professionals described Anthony's PTSD symptoms, nightmares, panic attacks, fear of driving. The jury listened carefully. When they returned, the number was clear: $8.7 million. The courtroom reacted quietly, but the meaning was powerful. The judge later ordered policy reforms within the department: mandatory disability awareness training, basic ASL instruction, new protocols for traffic stops involving visible disabilities. Officer Polson was terminated from the department weeks later. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. Anthony stood at a podium with an interpreter beside him. He signed slowly. This is not about money. This is about making sure police officers recognize disabilities. My hearing aids were visible. I was signing. I was pointing. All of it was there. Officers must be trained to see. Flashes from cameras lit up the afternoon. But the real work was just beginning. Anthony knew that one verdict could not change everything overnight. If he wanted real change, he would have to fight for it. And he was ready. The settlement papers were signed 18 months after the traffic stop. $8.7 million. The number made headlines across the country. But Anthony Lewis did not feel rich. He felt tired. He still woke up some nights shaking. He still avoided driving at night. When police lights flashed anywhere near him, even from a distance, his chest tightened and his breathing changed. Money did not erase that. But change began quickly. The police department announced mandatory disability awareness training for every officer. 80 hours. No exceptions. Officers would now learn how to recognize hearing aids, cochlear implants, wheelchairs, service animals, and disability placards. They would learn basic ASL signs: deaf, help, hurt, stop, okay. Anthony was invited to help design the training. At first, he hesitated. Standing in front of police officers again made his stomach twist. But his therapist told him something important. Taking control of the story can reduce trauma. So Anthony agreed. The first training session was held in a large room at the police academy. 40 officers sat in rows. Some looked serious. Some looked unsure. Anthony walked to the front with an interpreter beside him. The room was silent. He did not start with a speech. He played the body camera footage. The bright afternoon scene appeared on the screen. His hearing aids were clearly visible. The placard hung in plain sight. The signing was obvious. The taser fired. The officers in the room watched closely. Some shifted in their seats. When the video ended, Anthony began signing. The interpreter spoke. My hearing aids were visible. I pointed to them. I signed that I am deaf. I was holding my registration. I was not a threat. He paused. If you do not know what deaf communication looks like, you may think it is aggressive. It is not. One officer raised his hand. What should we do differently in that situation? Anthony answered directly. Look carefully. If someone is not responding to verbal commands, consider that they may not hear you. Check for hearing aids. Check for placards. Use gestures. Slow down. Another officer asked, what if we are unsure? Anthony replied, then assume a communication barrier before assuming a threat. The conversation stayed calm, but serious. Anthony noticed something important. Many officers were not defensive. They were listening. Over the next 6 months, he trained more departments. 12 cities adopted the curriculum. The program included real-life scenarios and role-playing exercises. Officers practiced basic ASL signs. They learned to keep small notepads in patrol cars to communicate through writing if needed. Meanwhile, State Representative Maria Gonzalez introduced a bill requiring disability awareness training for all law enforcement officers statewide. Anthony testified before the legislature. He stood in front of lawmakers, cameras pointed at him, and signed his story again. He showed photographs of his hearing aids. He showed still images from the body camera. He signed clearly. Disability is not a threat. Lack of training is. The bill passed unanimously. It was officially named the Anthony Lewis Disability Awareness Act. That day, Anthony's parents sat in the front row. His mother wiped tears from her eyes. For the first time since the traffic stop, Anthony felt something close to peace. But not everything changed overnight. Driving still triggered anxiety. One evening months later, Anthony was driving home when a patrol car pulled behind him at a red light. His hands immediately tightened on the steering wheel. His breathing sped up. The light turned green. The patrol car turned in a different direction. Anthony pulled into a parking lot and sat still for a moment. He signed to himself quietly. Safe. He knew healing would take time. Officer Linda Martinez, the officer who recognized his deafness that day, was promoted to Disability Liaison Officer for the department. She worked closely with Anthony to improve communication policies. The department also hired 4 officers fluent in ASL. As for Daniel Polson, he lost his job. He was barred from serving as a police officer in the state. In a recorded statement during the civil case, he admitted something important. I did not know what hearing aids looked like. I had no training on it. If I had known he was deaf, I would not have tased him. Anthony watched that statement later. He believed the apology was sincere, but sincerity did not erase the past. What mattered was prevention. Anthony used part of the settlement money to create the Lewis Foundation for Deaf Rights. The foundation provided free legal help to deaf individuals facing discrimination. It also funded workshops in schools teaching both deaf and hearing students about communication rights. The foundation's first case involved a deaf teenager who was handcuffed at school for not responding to shouted instructions. The school district settled quickly and implemented new policies. Change was spreading. Anthony began receiving messages from deaf individuals across the country. Some thanked him. Some shared their own painful stories. One message stood out. I saw your case on the news. Last week, an officer pulled me over. I signed that I am deaf. He signed back, okay, and wrote on a notepad. No taser, no shouting, just calm communication. Thank you. Anthony read that message twice. Then he smiled. At a national conference for law enforcement leaders, Anthony delivered a keynote address. He signed calmly. My case is not about blaming one person. It is about recognizing gaps in training. You cannot expect officers to recognize what they have never been taught to see. But once you teach them, you remove excuses. The room gave a standing ovation. For Anthony, The applause was not about pride. It was about progress. He still carried scars. Small marks on his chest from the taser probes. Bigger scars inside. But each training session, each new policy, each officer learning basic ASL, felt like turning pain into protection. The traffic stop that almost broke him had become a catalyst. Not because of money. Not because of headlines. But because he refused to stay silent. And as he looked toward the future, Anthony understood something clearly. Justice was not just a verdict. Justice was change that lasts. 2 years after the traffic stop, Anthony Lewis stood in front of a new group of police recruits at the State Academy. The classroom was full. Fresh uniforms. Clean notebooks. Officers at the very start of their careers. Anthony looked at them for a long moment before beginning. He did not start with anger. He started with truth. The body camera footage played once more. Bright daylight. Visible hearing aids. Disabled placard. Clear signing. Taser firing. Silence filled the room after the video ended. Anthony signed slowly. I cannot hear shouting. I cannot hear warnings. If you give verbal commands, and I do not respond, that does not mean I am dangerous. It may mean I cannot hear you. The interpreter's voice carried his words across the room. He walked closer to the front row and pointed gently to his ears. These are hearing aids. Learn what they look like. They are not weapons. They are medical devices. He paused. If you see hands moving in ways you do not understand, ask yourself, is this communication? One recruit raised his hand. What if we are under stress? What if we are afraid? Anthony answered simply. Slow down. Fear moves fast. Understanding takes a second longer. That second can save someone from being hurt. The room stayed quiet. After the session, several recruits came forward to shake his hand. Some signed thank you using the basic sign they had just learned. Anthony felt something he had not felt on the day of the traffic stop. Control. He was no longer the man on the roadside being shocked with electricity. He was the teacher. At home, life was steady but different. He returned fully to interpreting work. Hospitals, courtrooms, business meetings. He still loved helping people understand each other. But driving remained the hardest part. One afternoon, about 26 months after the incident, Anthony was driving home when flashing lights appeared behind him again. For a split second, his vision blurred. His hands tightened. His heart pounded. The lights were close. He checked his speed, within limit. He signaled and pulled over carefully. His chest felt tight, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. The patrol officer approached. Anthony lowered the window and immediately pointed to his ears. He signed clearly. Deaf. The officer nodded calmly. Then, to Anthony's surprise, the officer signed back one word. Okay. It was not perfect sign language, but it was enough. The officer pulled out a small notepad and wrote, Your brake light is out. Please show license and registration. Anthony felt his shoulders drop. He nodded. Slowly, calmly. He retrieved the documents. No weapon drawn. No taser. No shouting. The stop lasted less than 5 minutes. Before leaving, the officer signed awkwardly but clearly. Drive safe. Anthony drove away. This time, he did not pull into a parking lot to calm down. He kept driving. At a red light, he realized something important. The training was working. Not everywhere yet. Not perfectly, but working. Months later, Anthony was invited to Washington, D.C., to speak before a federal committee reviewing national policing standards. He stood before microphones and cameras. He signed his message. Disability awareness must not be optional. It must be standard. The Americans with Disabilities Act has existed for over 30 years. Rights only matter if people know how to respect them. Lawmakers nodded. Advocacy groups applauded. The Lewis Foundation for Deaf Rights expanded to 3 states. It provided workshops not only for police, but also for schools and public agencies. The goal was simple: prevent harm through understanding. Anthony often repeated one sentence during interviews: "My hearing aids were visible. The signs were visible." The problem was not invisibility. The problem was lack of knowledge. As for Officer Daniel Polson, he gave one final recorded interview during a review panel. "I made a mistake. I did not recognize the signs. I was not trained." That is not an excuse. It is a failure in the system. Anthony watched that clip once. He did not feel hatred. He felt clarity. The system had failed both of them in different ways. One through harm, one through lack of preparation. But systems can change. On the 3rd anniversary of the incident, the police department released updated statistics. Use of force incidents involving individuals with visible disabilities had dropped significantly. Complaints related to communication misunderstandings decreased. More departments requested the Lewis training program. One evening, Anthony stood in front of a small community center where he was about to give another presentation. Before walking inside, he looked up at the sky. 3 years ago, at almost this same time of year, he had been lying on the ground in shock, handcuffed, crying, trying to sign one word: deaf. Now he was walking in by choice. To speak, to teach, to protect others. Inside the center, a group of young deaf students sat in the front row. They looked at him with admiration. Anthony signed to them directly, without an interpreter. "You deserve safety. You deserve respect. If something wrong happens, speak up. Your voice matters, even if it is silent." Their faces lit up. In that moment, Anthony understood the full meaning of justice. Justice was not revenge. Justice was not just money. Justice was fewer tasers fired at people who cannot hear. Justice was officers who sign of okay instead of shouting. Justice was a future where a deaf driver pulling over feels safe, not afraid. The traffic stop on that October afternoon changed his life forever. But it also changed laws, changed training, changed awareness. And as Anthony walked off the stage that night, shaking hands and signing thanks, he knew one thing clearly: pain had started the story. Change had finished it.